Joining us now on the Picks for Polls podcast, he's a master at his craft. We've got Joe Gaither in the house, coming to us live from the University of Alabama. He covers the Crimson Tide for Sports Illustrated Bama Central. You can follow him on Twitter at Joe Gaither6. I mean, he's kind of in the same boat that I'm in the sense that he covers a team, but he's also a Bears fan. So he's, in a sense, constantly trying to find a happy medium between covering a team, which is Alabama, but then also being a Bears fan. How's it going, Joe? Thanks so much for being on here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate you thinking about me and excited about this Bears off season.
Yeah, and again, full disclosure, Joe and I have known each other for the last couple of years. We've obviously hopped on, each other's shows a number of times, so there's no shortage, and we text back and forth frequently too. By the way, Joe's the type of guy who will just randomly, decided to call me one day in the summer and be like, "Hey, I'll be in Chicago for Bears camp for a day or two if you want to meet up." So that's type of things that we pull. But Joe, let's get right into it. Because it's an interesting year if you are on the Bama beat, right? You've got Nick Saban gone. Kind of a shocking last-minute retirement. Kalen DeBoer comes in. I know yesterday was Monday afternoon, the first time you guys kind of got to hear from him. And then you look at this draft class coming up. And, this is one of those Alabama draft classes where, they've got a couple first-round picks, but there's not necessarily tons of, buzz or hype compared to years past with this team.
Yeah, absolutely. Alabama sent 10 guys to Indianapolis this past week to the NFL Combine, but you're looking at maybe 3 or 4, 5 if you're lucky from an Alabama perspective, going to go in the first round. But most of the impact players are on the defensive side of the football, so there's not really that star offensive player that really pops off the page. It is a huge period of transition here in Tuscaloosa, moving to Kalen DeBoer, and ideally he's able to continue what Nick Saban kind of built. And next season there'll be 10 more guys go into the NFL draft, and maybe Jalen Milroe is one of them, being a top-end quarterback. We'll have to see how he develops. But you guys, we want to talk about this year and how these defenders, if any of them, can end up with the Chicago Bears. Really, I don't want any of these offensive guys. You think about JC Latham, Jermaine Burton are kind of the offensive highlights. Jace McClellan, the running back, kind of your offensive highlights. And they're fine football players, but are they really going to help our Bears? I don't know if that's really going to be the case. The defensive players, I think there's a lot of opportunity to, if you were to get any of them, I think some of the values not really going to may not line up for Ryan Poles. But if you're able to get any of these defensive players, it might end up being some quality football players.
Yeah, and you talk about the defensive side of the ball, and it's certainly interesting because there's a pair of really good defensive backs in Kool-Aid McKinstry, great name by the way, along with Terrion Arnold. You look at kind of the focal point of the defense, which in my opinion is Dallas Turner. Again, a guy who really had to live in Will Anderson's shadow, and then Will Anderson leaves for the NFL draft last year, ends up getting drafted by the Houston Texans, and that was kind of the Dallas Turner show. But Dallas being an edge rusher is a guy that's been linked to the Bears a hell of a lot, right? You look at these mock drafts, I mean, there are people that are saying, well, he's going to go as high as number 9. There's people who say, well, the Bears need to maybe trade back, get a couple extra picks. They need to then go ahead and take a Dallas Turner. But who is Dallas Turner as a player, as a person? And, why should he be the number 1 edge on a lot of people's boards?
Dallas Turner is a player. I think Dallas Turner has a lot of versatility. Dallas Turner is a really, really good athlete. You saw that this past weekend up in Indianapolis. What did he go 4.46 from the 40-yard dash, and he had a 40-foot 40-inch vertical jump, 10-foot broad jump. But he's really, he can play the run and the pass pretty well. And you talked about being in the shadow of Will Anderson, and really it was hugely. His first year, he comes to Tuscaloosa, and he's a freshman, and Will Anderson's already kind of established as a sophomore. He pops on the scene, and he ends up leading Alabama in sacks because he got on the field the last half of the year. And I think that really he showed he took advantage of a lot of the opportunities that the offensive attention was on Will Anderson. Now that Will Anderson was gone last year, I think he stepped up in that defensive leader role. I'd like seeing him more as far as a pass rusher. The biggest thing about Dallas that impressed me last season was his ability to, when the game was coming towards the end of the game, when it was on the line, the offense is driving, trying to make a final touchdown to stay alive, or the defense needs to get a stop. Dallas Turner was in on a lot of those game-changing plays. He had a sack against Arkansas that basically sealed the deal against the Razorbacks in a game that never should have been as close as it was. He was in on the Jaden Daniels hit that knocked Jaden Daniels, unfortunately, out of the LSU game. And so Dallas Turner has really made a lot of impactful plays for Alabama's defense over the last 3 years, and particularly this past season. I think Dallas is a guy who's going to be versatile with in a defensive scheme. And so because of that, I think he's going to be really coveted as a player. And I think Dallas has quite an edge to him just as a person. I think he's always treated me very, very, very nicely. But I think that when he straps on the helmet, I think he goes into a mode that makes him a dangerous football player.
Yeah, he is this kind of intriguing player, right? Because you talk about a lot of the attributes, a lot of the abilities that he brings to the table. And, we know as a football player, he is able to set the edge. We look at kind of the production over the last couple of years. And, again, it's certainly big there. You talk about him compared to where he fits compared to the other edge rushers. And I think, for Dallas, he's very much a guy that can fit into a 4-3 defense, right? Which means that he's going to be the player that, you look at and the Bears should heavily target, because there's a lot of people out there who say, well, I see a lot of Brian Burns in him. There's so many analysts out there that say, well, he is sort of Brian Burns. He's not necessarily even close to what Will Anderson was as a player. But then I think the happy medium between those two is you're almost getting a TJ Watt type prospect, essentially. And I think that's what makes Dallas so dangerous, is that he doesn't just have, one or two pass rush moves in his arsenal. No, he's got 3 or 4. So when we say, well, he's mature beyond his years, it does not include the person. It includes who he is as a player as well.
Well, and the underrated aspect, the thing that not many people consider when they talk to edge rushers, is he plays the run very, very well. He plays the run, and he will set the edge with an aggressive style that will allow the inside backers to kind of scrape over and fill the gaps. And so he's going to be a football player who's a 3-down football player. Will Anderson was a 3-down player too, and Dallas, I think, is that. He's not just a pass rusher. One aspect, a lot of attention has gone to Dallas Turner as an edge player, but I think a lot of this goes into what the Bears are going to do with this number 9 pick and how they're going to. I think we're pretty much at the point where number 1 is settled, but number 9, if you trade, what are you going to do? Are you going to move to 13, 12, or are you going to move even further back? I like Dallas as a prospect, and look, if the Bears drafted an Alabama player, I'll be happy anyways. But I wonder if there's a possibility that the Bears might be thinking about Chris Braswell instead, Dallas's other edge rushing, his counterpart, and in a second or third round capacity because of the value. Do you spend the number 9 pick on Dallas Turner because he's there and because you need him, and because that's what you're looking for? If he's the guy you're after, great. But I think it's going to be a complicated draft for the Bears because Ryan Poles has so many options, and I think Dallas Turner gets a lot of the love. But Chris Braswell's a dirty, gritty edge rusher as well. Not near the athlete, but his motor is just as high, and I think that he's got a pretty big chip on his shoulder. And I think he's going to be an underrated edge rusher as well in the NFL.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because I shouldn't even say Chris, but my bad. Alabama kind of has this history of sending, every single year they send one top-notch pass rusher to the league, and then a couple other kind of guys that end up falling through the cracks. Now, Chris Braswell to me is insanely interesting because as a case study, you study the guy's measurables, and he's there at about 6'3", 6'4", 251, so he's right up there with Dallas Turner in terms of, his height and his weight. And then you start looking at his arms, they're 33 and I think a quarter inch arms, along with about, 9-inch hands. So he's kind of built somewhat similar to Dallas Turner, but I think the discrepancies really come in terms of who they are as football players, right? Like,
Explosion.
yeah, exactly, explosion. Like Dallas is this freak athlete who is going to make his presence known every single play. Chris, on the other hand, has been good. He's been productive, but he's still the type of young player that you can just say has, another really good year to go before he realizes his true ceiling.
Yeah, I think he's a good player, and I don't know if even his true ceiling is going to be as explosive as Dallas Turner will be. But I think Chris Braswell is going to be a player that can be maybe an 8 to 10 year player in the league, as far as a guy who. Oh, he's our second best edge rusher on our team. He's going to be reliable. And so I think that he presents an interesting prospect. It's going to go to all. It comes down to what does Ryan Poles want to do. You saw the news today about Jalen Johnson getting franchise tagged, and I think we're all probably confident that a deal is going to get done. But if he doesn't do that, you've got two corners, that are probably going to be going between 12 and 25, 12 and 32. Are you trading back? And is that in your equation? I mean, I think that Terrion Arnold is a real football player as a cornerback. Now, I don't think that's on the Bears' radar. I think the preference is to extend Jalen Johnson and, move on in other areas of need. But the Bears just have so many options, you say, that it makes it kind of hard to predict and a lot of fun to follow.
Yeah, I mean, it is. So I was sitting a couple days ago, kind of getting ready for this whole thing, and I'm looking at some of these Alabama guys, and I'm like, a strong draft class is when they send like 4 to 5 star players, right? This year, though, you've got a significantly weaker draft class in terms of just what Alabama's sending to the league. And again, that has nothing to do with the Nick Saban retirement. It is kind of just, Alabama in general, the way that the cards shook out this year. But then you look at some of these other guys, right? Like a JC Latham, a Terrion Arnold, a Kool-Aid McKinstry, and you all of a sudden kind of get the feeling that those guys are going to go ahead and be impact players. But really the headline of this class is going to be Turner and then everyone else.
Yeah, it's Turner, and I think that Terrion Arnold is going to be I think he's going to be a real player as a corner. Kool-Aid is a good cover guy, but I think Terrion will be a player that will play the run and play the pass, and also be an electric player off the field that the fans get to know. I think that's a little aspect to the NFL career when you think about a player profile. Kool-Aid's going to be a good player. But I think that Kool-Aid, not necessarily as physical as Terrion Arnold is, and a little bit quieter off the field as far as his personality. It is all about Dallas Turner. It's going to be all about Dallas Turner, and really, where does JC Latham fit? I don't think JC Latham is really on the Bears' radar at all as a right tackle, and he is a true right tackle and not really going to be a left tackle at all. I don't know that that's something that's on the Bears' radar, and does that qualify as a star type player? He's probably going to go between 10 and 20. He's probably going to go between 10 and 25 is probably his range. I don't see him on the Bears in the Bears plans by any means. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a less star-studded Alabama draft class than it has been, because outside, you think about it. Look, I saw Jermaine Burton mocked to the Bears in the 3rd round. Don't do that. Do not do that. Do not do that, Ryan Poles. If you need a wide receiver who's going to help Caleb Williams, or even here's for you crazy fans, the Justin Fields. You need a mature wide receiver who's going to come to Chicago, and I don't know if Jermaine Burton quite fits that bill. So you think about the offensive players, that's who gets a lot of the love when you think about star draft class. you don't want Jermaine Burton, and I think I like Jace McClellan. He's a good little running back, but he's not a star. He's not going to be a star running back in the NFL. You might get him in the 5th round, 6th round, and yeah, I guess the Bears are going to be looking for more running back depth down the line. I wouldn't be doing backflips if the Bears drafted Jace McClellan. So I agree overall to your point that the star power isn't necessarily is there as much as it usually is outside of Dallas Turner.
So, okay, let's get back to Turner here because, again, this team needs edge rushers. And I would even argue this. Like, when they traded that 2nd-round pick away from Montez Sweat and then gave him the $100 million deal, I was like, all right, well, this kind of takes, one of the top edge rushers off the board for this team unless the board falls in such a way where they're able to basically draft one of these guys because they've fallen into their lap. So where does Dallas stack up compared to the kid from Penn State and Chop Robinson, or the UCLA kid in Letu, or the Florida State guy in Jared Verse? Like, where does he rank amongst those guys? How does he compare to them?
Well, you're asking the Alabama guy, so my bias goes through. I think he's better than Chop Robinson, the Penn State guy. I think Jared Verse is in his class, but I think Jared Verse plays a bit differently. I think Jared Verse plays more gives you more inside. I think Dallas Turner is more versatile than Jared Verse. Mm-hmm. And kind of the same with the UCLA young man, but dude, those 3 guys. I mean, the UCLA. If the Bears ended up with Jared Verse or Letu, I wouldn't be really upset either. My biggest thing is, how do you maximize the 9th pick? Is Dallas Turner at the 9th pick the best choice, or is the choice to trade it back to 12 or trade back to 15, or like how do you because look, I'm fine with what we're going to do at number 1, but how do you maximize that number 9 pick? And to me, I mean, I know you had me on to talk about Alabama, but it's Olufoshanu, it's Malik Neighbors, it's Brock Bowers, it's somebody like that is how you maximize that 9th pick. Dallas, shoot, I'll be doing my own personal backflips. I will be. And I think he will be a good player if you take him at 9. And I think Chicago will end up liking him a lot because he was very much behind the DOA moniker that the Alabama defense kind of took on as a hashtag. I think the Chicago fan base will like that mindset. And shoot, if you're going to get rid of Eddie Jackson, you need to replace him with another Alabama defender. And all right, we're fine. It was the right time to move on from Eddie. So, is he the most? Can he be is he the option at number 9 that maximizes the value? Maybe. I think it depends on how the board falls in front of you, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's so looking at these, because I actually just wrote up scouting reports on Verse and Letu, and I'm going to confidently say, like, you have, a handful of different things here, right? And one of the biggest things I think you have is that this is an edge class where any of these guys could be the first off the board. It really just depends on what you're looking for. Now, knowing the Bears and, what they covet and their edge rushers, you're going to want someone who's a pure pass rusher. You're going to want someone who's got a high motor, someone who wants to go ahead and stop the run. In your 4-3 defenses, because you have your 2 nose tackles on the interior, usually playing a 1-3 technique, that effectively leaves your defensive end lined up as, let's just say, a 4-5 technique, right? That effectively means that your defensive ends are guys that just have to be able to play with their hand in the dirt. And as we've seen over the years from Bama, I mean, Dallas Turner has done a lot of that, putting his hand in the dirt, being a guy that, has a really quick first step, has a really quick get off, is going to be the type of player who is going to step in from day one. And from everything you've told me throughout the last couple months, from everything, I've read from other people on the Bama beat, it's very clear that he's going to be the type of kid that comes in day one, goes under Montez Sweat's wing, and just learns as much as he can in order to really ensure that his career takes off.
Yeah, and he's the kind of guy that I think Chicago needs a lot more of, just personality-wise. He's got a lot of personal pride in him, whether it's, whether the score is against him or not. I think he is the type of player that, okay, the Bears might be losing in this situation. You got a lot of personal pride, and I think you need that from the defensive side of the football. I'll be happy if he becomes the pick at number 9. I'd probably rather trade back 3 or 4 spots and pick up an extra pick and take him at 12 or 13. But you never know how the board's going to fall. I think that he is very coachable. I do think that. I think he really, when he came to Alabama, you used the Montez Sweat comparison. When he came to Alabama, Will Anderson had just had his great freshman year and was a sophomore. And so you already had somebody that was, I just put in a good 12 months, somebody to learn from. And then he passed it down. He has, now that he's gone into his junior year, or had his junior year at Alabama, he has been very influential to Alabama's 5-star freshman Keanu Keely and Yanzi Pierre. So 2 guys who are just finished their freshman year. It's kind of come full circle for Dallas Turner. I think that maturity goes a long way in a locker room. And, for a guy, we make fun of the hits principles all the time, but, Dallas Turner, I think, fits into kind of the hits principles as far as what he's doing on and off the field.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be something to watch, but kind of getting away from Dallas Turner here, we've seen a lot of people in this fan base kind of wish that Ryan Poles would spend big money on another interior edge rusher, right? Or the Bears go ahead and let's just say they trade back and all of a sudden there's maybe a defensive tackle that they decide to go ahead and draft. And, Poles has this uncanny trend of having someone down at the Senior Bowl in terms of someone who is coaching on the national or the American team, and all of a sudden the Bears end up drafting that player. But how about the defensive lineman Justin Ebo Igby? I hope I'm saying that correct, because he's a guy that I think is kind of flown under the radar here. A guy a lot of people may not know about because he's obviously an older prospect, a guy who never really garnered attention. It kind of just won by being and made a name for himself by being good at football.
Justin Eboigbe missed and pretty much the entire 2023 season with a neck injury, and came back. 2022 season. Excuse me. Last year was 23. He missed his junior year. He came back for his senior year. Basically, he was at a point in his football career where the doctors were like, we don't know if you're going to play if your career is over or not. And so this past year at Alabama, his senior year, he's as athletically, does he pop a whole lot? No, but like his motor is super high and his intensity is really what carried him, and his IQ. If you put on the Alabama defensive tape, he's in on almost every play, whether he's getting a hat on the tackle or he's in on the pile. He was everywhere for Alabama, so I think he's a really mature football player. If you're able to get him in a later round scenario, 4th, 5th round scenario, I think he'd be a good little addition. He'd be very much. I do think you need interior help. Golly, you got some last year. You got some last year with Gervon Dexter and Pickens, but you need more. What do you think about moving back? You say, I know this is an Alabama segment, but getting moving back to the 16s or so and looking at that Illinois defensive tackle.
I mean, yeah, see, I am actually, it's crazy, right? Because we have these discussions ongoing on the Bear Report boards, the forums that we've got on the website. And again, if you're listening to this and you're not a part of the website, I mean, I highly recommend you get on there, create a free or premium account, and then go ahead and get involved because there's a lot of good discussion going down. But, I've kind of been asked a similar question in terms of, hey, what happens if you do move down? I think, you do consider moving down, especially after trading the 5th round pick for Ryan Bates, recouping some of those extra day 2, day 3 picks, possibly even getting a second, getting, an extra 3rd, 4th, or 5th round pick in there, and then going ahead and, taking some of these other interior guys that are going to be there. That I think certainly makes a lot of sense. Again, Jerzon Newton's a guy who, I would be completely fine with. Now, my whole thing is this, though, is you kind of spent 2 high picks on defensive tackles last year, so it shouldn't really be a conversation unless you feel like one of these guys is going to be someone that is a can't-miss type prospect.
Well, you see him just up there and The run defense did improve through the rest of the year, but God, the first 5-6 weeks it was horrible. So I like Aboigbe as a later round prospect for the Bears, but I probably wouldn't go after him before the fourth round. And you'd get a guy who would be what? You wouldn't get it wouldn't be you wouldn't get a Pro Bowler, no. You wouldn't be an All Pro, no. You'd get a guy who'd give you 4 or 5 sacks a year and who'd play, 35% of the snaps on defense, kind of be a rotational defensive lineman. And so if that's what you're looking for out of him, I think he's a mature player.
Absolutely. All right, Joe. Let's kind of, it's going to be an interesting off season, right? But before we get out of here, where can people follow you on Twitter and check out your work?
The easiest place to follow me is at Joe Gaither 6. All my social medias, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, everything is at Joe Gaither 6. And then I work for BamaCentral.com with a Sports Illustrated home for Alabama. So you can check us out. Everything is free at BamaCentral.com.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for being on here. We'll definitely have to do it closer to the start of the college football season. But, like I said, dude, you're welcome on here anytime. Roll Tide. Keep it up. Keep up the great coverage. We'll talk to you later.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.